I'm doing work I completely love. Business is growing gorgeously and really with like almost no stress. I worked so stressed so hard to, get into Harvard and do all that stuff. And I've spent 15 years just cleaning up the shit and the gunk of we don't need to be so anxious to get work done. I'm so much more effective in my work now. And I go through the day and I think about 11 different things perhaps I could be doing for my company. And I notice I'm not doing them. And I feel a lot of trust that I'm not supposed to be doing them. As I unfold with my love life, as I unfold with business direction, and as much as I love teaching kids, and maybe that is where I'll stay, part of me wonders, maybe I don't want to be talking about grammar rules and math formulas so much with teenagers who are ambivalent about the test and where they're going in life, and maybe being forced into your purpose is not some objective outcome. Your purpose is a state of being. So that's the question of just this moment, right? So all I can do is just put my attention on the space between my breaths, and really everything else is just divine intervention flowing through me. The synchronicities and how it all aligns and shows up is credible.
Welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. This show is for entrepreneurs that have chosen to define their life beyond the material. They have followed their soul on a hero's journey towards the mystery of the spiritual. I'm your host, Garrett Ng. Each episode will be learning from awakened entrepreneurs and spiritual thought leaders. They have broken through the mold of being ordinary to extraordinary, challenging our paradigm, shining light to the dark, giving hope when there is doubt. The moment of truth is upon us. It is time to transcend our world from fear to love. Are you ready? Let's go! Welcome to this week Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. Today we have one of the very special guests. This gentleman's name is Jim Treadway. I could tell you about him and his story and his successful business and his journey as an awakened entrepreneur, but why not better, as this is the first time I've actually connected with him over the phone, over the internet, and I have not connected with him in person. But yet my inner soul guidance tells me that this guy's got a lot of wisdom. He didn't just wake up yesterday. It's been a few years down the track, and I'm just assuming right now. But what a wonderful journey that we, as in myself and you, get to listen to his awakening entrepreneur journey together. So welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Gary.
How you been, brother?
I told someone tonight that I'm a 9.2 out of 10.
9.2. Awesome.
Yes.
By the end of this, we're going to be like 10.2 off the Richter scale. So tell us about your story. Where will you start your journey?
Let's see. We could talk tutoring journey, personal journey, Tony Robbins journey. What are you thinking?
I guess wherever you feel like you're getting called to share. One of the big things that we wanted to learn on our podcast is often is not talked about in academic world, growing up in the schooling system from our parents. It's not talked about in the personal development world, at least not explicitly as I understood it, that there's this whole new world beyond the material world that we know. There may be like, I don't know, what's your religious background? Different religion talks about certain things, but it never resonated with myself from a deep spiritual, like whether you're talking about the astral plane or whatever these they are, but it's a whole crazy and wacky world that I've uncovered, and a lot of the entrepreneurs are starting to uncover it as well. So where did your journey begin?
Interesting. It began when I was born with something called Hirschsprung's disease, where I had no nerve endings at the end of my intestines. So I would go like 5 or 10 days in a row without pooping, and everything would back up in my stomach, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. And my parents would go find a friend who knows someone who's in medical school. This is 1985, so it's before internet. And then the person at medical school would go and photocopy everything they could about what they thought might be wrong. And they have two older brothers. So my guess is they were quite stressed and quite worried and didn't really know what was wrong with their third boy. Between 3 and 4, I had 4 major surgeries. They took out 18 inches of my intestines, and my appendix had become infected by then. And I think growing up, I had sort of like a PTSD response to that. So I was just unreasonably anxious, a lot of bottled up emotions. I wouldn't respond to things normally. And I was so torn up and anxious and unhappy inside. And I tried to fix it all through achievement, like achieving for my parents and, for me too, but definitely got it from them. And so I got into Harvard for undergraduate. So the hard work really paid off on that level. But I was very lost. I didn't know myself, quite depressed. I would, if I stood on a subway platform, I'd be afraid. Like, I better walk the other way when the train comes or find a column to stand behind. Otherwise, I was afraid I was going to throw myself in front. So from all that pain, which I couldn't quite explain or understand, especially because I had succeeded in so many ways, through some different twists and turns, I'll say this. My first 2 years of college, I had chronic pain in my hands. And then I read a book my first few years into junior year, the third year in US University, that said most chronic pain is caused by repressed emotions. And they say that people who tend to get this are perfectionists and goodists, people always trying to be a good person. And I knew I was like 14 out of 10, both. And that type of person, perfectionist and goodist, they put so much pressure on themselves that their body will scream out. And my body was screaming out with pain in my hands. And so I read it just a few weeks into my third year. I read this book. I knew it was me. I took a year off from school right away, and all the pain in my hands disappeared. And it was like a light bulb went on, and I suddenly realized, like moment to moment, almost like ones and zeros in a computer, I was getting this immediate biofeedback in my body of stress or relaxation. And I had always been following this, in so many ways, a stress response around achievement and try to get my parents' love. But I really had no idea who I was. So I decided I was never again going to live for anybody else. And I was going to listen to those ones and zeros and follow what was true as my body was telling me. And I've been doing that for 15 years ever since. And I've completely found myself and learned so much about growing and well-being and who I am and where I belong in the world, and plenty more to learn. But that's maybe my version that I can try to say.
Wow, what an incredible story. Thank you for sharing, Jim. I was just imagining, like, when you had the intestine issues and
Yeah.
you have all this crap backed up inside. I remember, like, when I started my awakening journey, one of my friends got me onto this product. It's made of all this herbal stuff. It tastes like one of those like Chinese herbal brew that just really yucky, brown in color. It tastes like wood, many different types of wood mixed together. But it's called like Bowel Restore at a time. Now I think it's called something else. But anyway, he said, like, if you do like a cleanse, like which a bowel restore and clean out your bowel, it's more powerful. Like if you do it consistently for 30 days, it's more powerful than you meditate for 30 days. Because I would imagine that it's a disease that you had, but the gift of it is almost like it wanted to condense the experience of various emotion trapped inside of you. And then it's like, okay, the mission for the rest of your life is to clear it, but you get it charged up really quickly. And good on you for going through the path. And you also reminded me of one of the Netflix documentary that I watched recently. I think it's called The Last Shaman. It talks about someone like in similar to the archetype of, I think it's Harvard or one of the top colleges out there, but yet like he succeeded like based on all the parents and society conditionings, like, but yet he wasn't fulfilled and he went to search for himself. And for him particularly, and went through multiple suicidal attempts, including like going in front of the train as you described, and eventually led him to going through the plant medicine, I think in Peru. So
Yeah.
fascinating.
You know what? I realized I saw that. I actually watched that a couple of years ago, now that you say it. Yeah.
Uncanny resemblance. So I want to get to this down the track in our podcast because through your unique upbringing life journey, you would have a very unique perspective, especially if you've got tutoring business. And I've got 3 kids myself. And since I've started homeschooling / cosmic schooling them, is often asking myself, like, what is the best way to guide them? As we've
Well,
seen, there are plenty of examples that's people who have succeeded, whether it's financially, academically, and even people that with a lot of friends, but still inside, there's something that's missing. There's something
yeah.
that's missing to the point that like sometimes like suicide is the only answer they could find.
Yeah.
So before we get to that, like I want to explore a bit more. Like it set you off to a trajectory of like 15 years of searching and uncovering different things. Like what were some of the things that you uncovered?
Yeah. My first guru was Byron Katie,
Yeah.
the work, because somebody on a message board for the chronic pain message boards mentioned Byron Katie, and I just devoured her books.
Yeah.
And I remember my girlfriend at the time, she used to call her Katie O'Brien, and she hated it. And, we long since broken up, but man, that would be the first of, this is something I would do. I would find a new teacher and I would just go so 100 miles an hour down everything they've got. Um,
You reminded me of myself. Byron Katie, she's one of the very big influence in my awakening journey as well, because not many people is sharing the awakening and surrendering journey. Like it's so open and raw. And examples that I can think of is like people pointing a gun at her and how she respond to it. It's just so unusual. But in time of crisis that I was facing, and seeing how she actually deal with it in those situations, it gave me an idea that, or at least intellectualize, there is another way that could be walked.
yeah, and it was, who knows, maybe it was some of my first exposure to surrender, just to doubt the world of the mind. And she's really just advocating a nothingness, and then to learn to trust that. So she was the first one. I got really into nonviolent communication, really into that. I started going to some meetings of nonviolent communication. I mean, read the book like 3, 4 times, underlined it like crazy, and was still at an age back then when once I would discover it, I would think everybody needs to do it now. So I'm buying the books for people and probably just throwing it onto so many people who are not really dying to hear about it.
And how do you master the nonviolence communication? Because I find that when I get triggered, I get into this unconscious state. And so whatever I know, like consciously or intellectually, it doesn't matter because I can't pull it out at that point.
Good question. Do you know, I would think in the last year, I've only been triggered maybe once. However, I've been single. So I ended my last relationship a year ago. We used to trigger each other like crazy. But, I think I've only been triggered once I can really remember in the past year. I get triggered a lot less. And actually, I think plant medicine has had so much to do with that.
Okay.
How far have you gone with plant medicine so far?
Yeah, I've gone on free retreats with ayahuasca. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's each time different, but I'm open to exploring more when the time presents itself.
And have you noticed that the triggers, how you don't have so many triggers since you started it?
Oh, it's hard because I feel like my whole awakening journey is so condensed.
Yeah.
Like I'm waking up like 3 o'clock in the morning and listening to things, reading things, and watching things, and meditating, and all these different things. I'm squashing in a very condensed period of time,
Right.
and so which one is actually leading to it is hard to tell. But I have observed sometimes, whether it's through plants or whether it's through certain consciousness work, we can get even more triggered because
Mm,
some of the things that it didn't trigger us before,
mm,
some of the shadow stuff, it now when you raises your vibration, it's got nowhere to hide. So it surfaces out. And it's almost like act a way for it to be purged out of your system, or at
mm.
least for you to face it and to resolve it.
Right. Interesting. So I was involved in a community. Have you ever heard of orgasmic meditation?
Yeah.
I was involved in that community, and for a year I went 100 miles an hour into that. And the way that people would relate to each other in that world was so intentionally raw that what you're describing, yeah, there were so many triggering experiences there. And then I became wary of it, of that world. And since I've left it, maybe 3-4 years ago, I had all these teachers having an argument in my mind. And they're all, charismatic, powerful teachers. And I didn't know who to listen to. And I wasn't hearing like the signal of my own calling amidst it. And that's what took me to plant medicine. On one hand, it was very noticeable after my first ayahuasca retreat.
When was that?
Yeah, incredible. And I noticed that afterwards, I didn't have the triggers with my family hardly at all. And I used to be civil war with my family.
Oh, wow.
And now it's basically so much fun. I would say 99.8 or 9% trigger free now.
Yeah. And which plant teacher was it?
The first one was ayahuasca. I've probably done maybe 20 ayahuasca ceremonies and San Pedro once, psilocybin once, and some milder plants like sassafras and white lily, probably a handful of times.
Mm.
So, yeah. As you say it, I'm wondering, okay, how much healing has taken place versus, like I said, I'm single. I'm involved in that community, which is sort of almost intentionally provoking each other all the time. So, has my vibration risen or fallen?
You're in a modern day monastery. I think there's beauty in whatever scenario that you're in, whether you're going through deep shit right now or whether you're in a serene place, whatever it is deep beauty within. Yeah. I know that when I was going through the deep awakening journey, like where I had to contend with the kids, the relationship, slightly the health issues, but also business, finance, all coming together. It's like, holy moly. I guess as an entrepreneur, I have more free time than most, but I looked at someone like yourself or someone that had even more free time than myself, which they may not have kids or they may have a relationship, but they may not have a conflicting or charges a relationship. It's just like beautiful relationship. They don't fight. I used to envy them. This guy, you can just learn or can just meditate and do whatever they want for a long time. But then I realized that the growth that I was getting each day, I'll be learning that stuff at night. And in the daytime, I have to actually integrate because I have to put the work into practice. I'm getting triggered, especially with the kids. Like almost every micro moment, I can observe myself that, oh my God, like they fighting between themselves and they shouldn't be fighting. And then, hey, they left some dirt on the table. Oh my God, someone just spilled water. So each micro moment, I'm getting triggered and I'm thinking, and these are the small stuff as well as having the business and finance stuff going on at the same time, the relationship pieces. Those things actually provoked me to learn even faster, learn even more, go even deeper to find the answers.
Wow. I think I've been in a grace period for the last few years because before that was so much intensity and so much pain. It is a grace period right now. And it's even clearer now that you say it. Because, I don't have kids right now and don't have a partner and dating and doing work that I love and reading and sleeping and working out and going to seminars. I've probably lost touch. It sounds bad, but I've lost touch with how ridiculously blessed in some ways this experience is.
Yeah, I do remember that period. And even right now, as much problems as I can describe it, I still classify myself like in a bubble. Not having to work for an income right now in the current pandemic, like, geez, that's a blessing. Having like a wonderful home and beautiful kids and wife to turn up to, that's the blessing as well. But these are like existential crises that I can observe myself being triggered. I can see certain stuff around the house and it's like, oh man, like I'm getting triggered. And you may say that, hey, like normally we call it first world problem. But as I consulted with my shaman, like one of the things that as you go to the awakening process, you tend to go through a minimalism phase, or at least certain group of people do go through that phase because each item have energy. And when you have energy around the house, they can trigger you. So I'm finding like stuff around the house is triggering me. Even if no one is fighting with me, I can still get upset.
Yeah. Have you practiced Marie Kondo?
Yeah. I'm going through that together with my wife. And I've Marie Kondo myself, but Marie Kondo also teaches you can't touch other people's stuff. So there's other people's things around the house that's been triggering me, but it's also at the same time helping me to learn and grow. I know part of it is a sign for me to go deeper in my spiritual journey because, as Tony talks about, like nothing has meaning until you give it. So I just
Right.
given a certain interpretation of the things around the house, and I could look at some of the people living in the third world country or lesser place. They would die to, they would so love to have my current lifestyle. So I
Yeah.
know it's part of me, but at the same time, the triggering point, it came recently that I even moved out of home because it just got so intense. But I realized it's having, for me personally, is finding a marriage in the middle. That one is having a healthy boundary of what is acceptable for myself to be in the same household. And I think
Yeah.
like with 5 people in the same household, every single person should have their healthy boundaries. There's certain things that if we don't have that, we could quite easily, what do you call it, taken advantage of, or people stepping over you, or your energy just get interrupted too much. You don't have a place to protect your boundaries.
Were you at the financial trip when Bo Shao spoke to us? He was a Chinese entrepreneur. You might find him interesting. He was the first mainland Chinese to get a full scholarship to Harvard, maybe 1998 or so. And his first business, he went back to China and basically copycatted eBay and sold the website for billions of dollars. And then he built another business. This one was more original and sold that one for billions of dollars. So twice he's built and sold multi-billion-dollar companies. And then, he had all the money in the world and he had 3 kids and a wife, and they would spend time in the south of France, or, they're trying all the fanciest places in the world to live. And his middle son was beating up on the youngest child, the daughter. And it was driving him crazy, and nothing he could do as a dad seemed to stop this kid from beating up on the little daughter. And the wife would say, oh, you should go play with the kids. Why aren't you with the kids? And he realized he didn't want to even be with the kids or play with the kids. And he felt so awful. And so he started to, you familiar with the Hoffman process?
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet, but it's in California, 1-week process. People who go through it uniformly rave about it. And he did the Hoffman process, and he just started to piece together his entire childhood. And his dad was maybe used to drink a lot. He was almost always very angry. And the one day he remembered from growing up when his dad was sort of very relaxed and playful and loving was the day that Bo Shao won the Shanghai math competition, citywide math competition as a 10-year-old. And so he learned he had to be number one. And he couldn't really form friendships. And as you hear Bo Shao, and we were at Tony Robbins' Platinum Financial Trip, it's 2 years ago. Bo Shao comes on, a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt. He's very humble, quiet spoken. And everybody in the room is dreaming of one day getting 100,000th of how far he's gotten with his work. And he's basically telling us he was more unhappy as a multi-billionaire than he ever was before that. He became so afraid that he might lose some of his money. And then what would his friends think? And now, why hasn't he grown his money instead of allowing to treat and all this? And now I think he's devoting his time into studying parenting. He's created a whole research institute around parenting because he feels like there are hardly any really genuine scientific resources about what good parenting is. And he said that, he thought his message, which is really about inner fulfillment, he thought, it was only for the West. That China they didn't want to hear it. Everybody's in Shenzhen and working their butts off in China, build huge businesses, etc. But he did go back to Shenzhen and he did a talk, for like 60 entrepreneurial friends. And, I think he thought it was going to be a half-hour talk. And 6 hours later, he's still talking and everybody's crying, bawling, because they're all experiencing it. And he was so humble, the way he spoke to us. It almost seemed like the audience missed his message. But it was one of the most powerful speeches I've ever seen. And
Wow.
Something about your journey, as you've been telling me, it reminds me a bit of Bo Shao.
Yeah. Because he's someone that I looked up to. I don't know how, but that somehow I became a founder and CEO of crypto fund trading business. And at the time, it's like, dude, I'm not a fund manager. I'm not a trader. I'm not like a blockchain person. And I had no interest of getting into this. But going down that rabbit hole kind of led me to a whole bunch of different perspectives, uncovering, like, I guess, picking up different stones and see what's under it, including how money works, how the economy works. And one of the things that led me to is Boshan and hearing about using his business as a money making machine and giving back to society. I thought it's incredibly inspiring. But I
Yeah.
didn't know about the stuff that you shared in the podcast just then. And kind of makes more sense, because why would someone suddenly want to give back and help the whole world, like, type of person? And it
Yeah.
must have been an interesting background.
Yeah. The way he told this story and his childhood was very vulnerable. So vulnerable too. Really showing his own weaknesses and limitations.
Yeah, I definitely went through that journey of building my business to be like one of the best place to work in Australia. Google came number one, my company came second, and the fastest growing, and we're growing a lot. But yeah, at the end of the day, now that I look back at it, none of that really matters. It's so much that we've been conditioned to think that that is the epitome of life. Not saying that we shouldn't have it, but it's almost like if you're unhappy, it doesn't matter what flavor of ice cream or what dessert you're having or what meal you're having, you're still not going to be happy for most people. Some people, food makes them happy. So tell me about some of the interesting plant journeys you've been on, plant medicine journeys that you've been on. Because obviously, compared to myself, you're a lot more experienced in this domain. Um, is there certain things that you can share why you keep going back? And is it each time is different, or is there a certain unique flavor that you get from the experiences is kind of predictable?
There is something predictable. I mean, for me, it's I will be destabilized. It will shake up my ego. It will show me something more raw, usually. It'll either challenge me to stay in uncomfortable sensation or experiences and stay present there and grow that muscle. Or it might show me beautiful. It will often remind me of love. Like, it will remind me how much love exists between me and my clients, which is really important to me. Like, when I finish a session with a student, like, my heart is just beaming. It's just, I've just gotten to pour all this love onto them. And it matters to me that my students know how much I love them and that I care about them. And sometimes in the journeys, I'll really get shown that they know how much I love them. Apparently, I needed to experience that affirmation. Same with family. More recently, it was coming to terms with the fact that, to whatever percent possible, like, as a human being, a spectrum of sexuality, I'm not 100% straight. Whatever the hell a percentage is, I have to allow that I could experience like a romantic or a sexual connection with a man. And I had always been plenty straight enough that I could pretend I was 100% straight. And more recently, it was like, listen, like, just drop any walls you have around any of that. If the day comes where you've experienced an attraction to a man or whatever, like, it's wonderful, it's beautiful. Let it be, just like you've let your attraction to women be your whole life. Just let it be whatever it is. And actually, Byron Katie, she talks about sort of a spiritual moment where you see something, you think it's a snake, but when you're present with it, it's a rope. And I, growing up as a boy at soccer camp when I was 10, I had a crush on a boy at the soccer camp. At the time, I was so horrified by this experience. I was so that ever since then, I was always uncomfortable and not fully myself in the presence of gay men. And it was like, more recent plant journeys, it was like, these walls have to come down. There's nothing to be afraid of. I have to, and for me, it was like around the capacity to be attracted to a man. It's like, once it doesn't matter whatever be attracted to, there's no more snakes. There's nothing to be afraid of. And it was funny because I would let myself go there in the journeys. Thankfully, I know enough and I've done enough work, I guess, to be able to surrender in these journeys. And my journeys would tend to be quite sexual, actually. And then all of a sudden, amidst all these sexual journeys, there were a couple of scenes where suddenly I was making out with a man. And it was like, but more and more, there was an experience of who cares? And then the next 5 nights of the week after the journey, I would have very sexual dreams and even more hetero than but whatever. It was like, just take down whatever walls are there. That's been a recent thing, and love myself for whoever and however I show up moment to moment.
Wow.
And I think in the cultural conditioning of our day and age, something about capitalism, I don't know why, it's very binary. You have to be in one group or the other, when our reality is something more fluid. And that's just been a little piece of self-love that's been unfolding the last maybe 6 months or so. I go and I'll do a plant medicine journey usually once a month in upstate New York. And so that's been coming up lately, and it feels lovely to have so much less and less of any fear around anything that I could be capable of in terms of homosexuality. You
Wow.
know?
What do you believe that your life is about? Because obviously you're a seeker. There's something that you're seeking. Like, what do you think that is this path is leading you towards?
It's love, and it's probably teaching love. It's a lot of self-love. In my tutoring, I get to teach my kids a lot of self-love. I used to work as an expert in personality type, which is just really focusing on individual differences and speed reading them and shining a light on people's superpowers. So there's a lot of self-love there. And something is just calling me to want to work with and help people in their most rawest and vulnerable questions around love and sex and relationships.
Wow.
So it will be really curious how that unfolds.
Yeah.
Something is calling me there. And I don't even have much rational, logical basis to say with you why this is coming out of my mouth right now.
Yes. And it makes so much sense. Like a lot of the time surrendering is like, it doesn't make sense, but do you go with it or do you fight it? Do you just suppress it, pretend it's not there? Instead of just speaking your mind on what actually is popping up, or mostly from your heart is what's calling you.
Yeah, and I've read so many books on love and relationships and sex, and I explore it, and I'm fascinated by teachers in this realm. And I love teaching and I love helping people. So something is definitely calling me to this. I read a book, someday you might be quite interested if you don't already know it. It's called Learning to Channel.
Okay.
So channeling the messages from your spirit guides.
Yeah.
Have you had contact with your spirit guides yet?
Yeah, like if I have, I wouldn't label it as in my own definition what channeling is compared to like someone like Bashar or Esther Perel, like not Esther Perel, Esther Hicks, and seeing how they do it. I do resonate with some of the clair abilities like clairsentience and clairaudibility, and it makes sense because I'm getting validation that like I'm on the right track, or if I sometimes needed answers, I just get some answer just popped in from nowhere. But I'm not having actual physical, I'm not having conversations with an entity, a light of some sort. Yeah.
You are.
Okay. Yeah.
And as you say it, and you're talking about it coming from nowhere, in my mind, especially because this book helped open my eyes, those are from your guides.
Yeah.
And right as I thought that and you're saying it, I'm covered in goosebumps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Goosebumps have never been wrong in my experience. So yeah, and well, I can say this. I found that book somehow this year, started reading it, and it gives you some processes to start to open up a dialogue with your guides.
Okay.
And sometimes they'll let you know their name.
Okay.
And so mine seems to be an Irish woman named Susan. And she seems to be here to help me on my path toward helping people with love and sex and relationships.
Yeah.
Maybe it was something you were saying, but just learning to surrender and trust and know that faith is really unfolding. And, probably even to degrees I don't even recognize how much it has happened because you lose track sometimes of the progress.
Yeah. So to give people a bit more context that, or even to your former self, maybe like 20 years ago, this lifestyle that you just described that has so much uncertainty, and based on some of the society beliefs that you're not as gung-ho in building a mega business anymore, or having the traditional relationship that you yearn for, like, hey, maybe like it doesn't sound like life is that great, but I'm sure, well, at least I feel that the life that you're living right now, the moments that you're experiencing is so much better than like 15, 20 years ago. Is that correct?
1,000,000%.
And how would you describe why is it better?
Good question. How did I end up on this podcast with you? It's just so I'm plugged into this amazing community with the Tony Robbins community. Just a quick little message to you. Here we are having this conversation. It's completely wonderful. And I'm sitting here and I have my vision. This is just, vision of my life. And I have these idols here and these quotes and, my ideal clients. And I'm doing work I completely love. Business is growing gorgeously and really with like almost no stress. I worked so stressed so hard to, get into Harvard and do all that stuff. And I have spent 15 years just cleaning up the shit and the gunk of we don't need to be so anxious to get work done. I'm so much more effective in my work now. And I go through the day and I think about 11 different things perhaps I could be doing for my company. And I notice I'm not doing them. And I feel a lot of trust that I'm not supposed to be doing them. I could come up with all kinds of bullshit to stress myself out of it.
Yeah.
And actually, and I just, I was just at the Platt spiritual trip. Master Ko was talking about when you meditate, if you put your attention on the breath, you get calmness. But the breath is in motion, so it's only calmness. If you want stillness, you put your attention on the space between the breaths. Somehow it clicked, as I unfold with my love life and as I unfold with business direction. And as much as I love teaching kids, and maybe that is where I'll stay, part of me wonders, maybe I don't want to be talking about grammar rules and math formulas so much with teenagers who are ambivalent about the test and where they're going in life, and maybe being forced into, imagine just working with adults who are eager to be working with you on the deepest questions of their hearts. That's where I'm headed. So as much as I love where I'm at, I have something even richer, even deeper that I'm headed towards. And yet I know it's not for me and my ego to try to figure it all out in my head. It's just, I saw a great post from a friend, totally divine intervention, how I met her too, in Miami at a coffee shop one day a few years ago. Stayed in touch since, and she's very spiritual. And she said, your purpose is not some objective outcome. Your purpose is a state of being. So that's the question of just this moment, right? So all I can do is just put my attention on the space between my breaths, and really everything else is just divine intervention flowing through me.
Yeah, perfect.
And it's, the synchronicities and how it all aligns and shows up is incredible. And to give you an example, at Leadership Academy, did you attend the virtual Leadership Academy a month or two ago? So this woman, let's see if we can see her. And she is Bernice Armour. She was the first Black female combat pilot in U.S. military history. She spoke. She was the best speaker I've ever seen in my life. I was so blown away by her energy and her message. And I found myself, I'm listening to every podcast interview she's done. I'm listening to her book. And somewhere, she mentions that when she goes to Starbucks, she drinks a white chocolate mocha. I'm the only person I've ever met who drinks a white chocolate mocha. And so anyway, right after she gave the talk at Leadership Academy, I find her website. I'm in this whole wormhole in her website. I'm filling out these forms. I'm watching her videos. And all of a sudden, at the end of it, you get a free call with her. Actually, she doesn't do this anymore. I found like a dead link in her site that's not meant to be functional anymore. And so yesterday, I had a coaching call with her. And I said, Vernice, you're the only other person I know who gets a white chocolate mocha at Starbucks. And she goes, how the hell do you know that? How do you know what I get at Starbucks? And, but I've listened to every interview she's ever done. And one time she mentioned it. And she said, I haven't had a white chocolate mocha this whole time in COVID. And today my assistant said she's going to Starbucks. Should I get you anything? And I asked her for a white chocolate mocha. She just, there's a reason we are talking today. And, to see how all these things are aligning. My hero, who's here on the wall, and I'm talking to her yesterday and mentioning, out of nowhere, I'm feeling called to mention white chocolate mocha, probably my guides who are letting me. And so now she thinks this is ordained by the stars that I'm talking to her. These types of things are just unfolding every day.
Yeah.
And I'm covered in goosebumps right now. Like, I don't even remember what your question is, but, compared to 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it's completely bonkers. It's so incredible. And here's the cool thing too. You familiar with Alison Armstrong?
Yeah.
So I'm taking her Smart Singles Intensive. And Alison will say she's not sure she even believes in marriage. She doesn't believe in committing to a person.
Yeah.
She believes in committing to a way of relating. And she's guiding us to be so clear and uncompromising in not settling
Yeah.
for any partner who when we are around them, we are not showing up as our favorite version of ourselves. So I get these premonitions of what's coming to me in terms of the relationship that's going to show up, and it's going to blow my fucking mind.
Wow.
Like, who I am today will not be able to believe that that actually came true. Just like we've had with our work. We were fantasizing about it. We wondered. We thought, God, is it possible? I don't know. It's so far in the future. But then someday you're like, oh my God, I'm living it.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that's exactly what's coming with the relationship. And when that happens, it's going to be insane.
Well, I think it's a good segue. Like, I want to pick your brains on some of the tutoring stuff because I know that what you do is extremely unique. You incorporate your personal awakening journey and personal development into your tutoring. But if you were to coach yourself, like knowing that the path that, whether it's yourself or someone similar to yourself, that's going through a path that they may be striving for academic excellence through family conditioning, society conditioning, or whatever,
Yeah.
and you see the light is getting dimmer and dimmer, and yet they may be performing exceptionally well academically.
Totally.
Like, what would you do?
I can see it. And that kid probably has nobody around them who can see it and say something. So sometimes I can just give a little bit of empathy to what they're really saying, or what they're really experiencing and feeling. And Chris Voss, Hostage Negotiator, Never Split the Difference. Have you heard of that book?
Yeah.
Oh, incredible. And he has these incredible empathy techniques where he's making hostage takers and terrorists feel seen and heard. He was the FBI top hostage negotiator for 30 years. And he just shows that these little moments of empathy suddenly make them feel so seen and heard that almost their subconscious cannot help but to unfold a more organic and grounded and genuinely sensible action in the moment. So I like to let these kids know, like, hey, I hear you and I see you. To be honest, probably sometimes I give them a pep talk where I tell them about my journey and how little the people around me understood the steps I was taking on my journey, including my family. I would probably just plant little seeds like this. And if all I can do is they get off the call and they feel sort of seen and heard, I know that's going somewhere positive that I probably can't even tell.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually had this come up on some plant medicine journeys where I can see and feel how much my impact has actually affected the course of my former students' lives and the decisions they make and how they feel about themselves.
Yeah.
But actually, as a teacher, you almost never get that feedback explicitly.
Yeah.
You don't even notice it, or let alone come and tell you.
Yeah.
But on some of the plant medicine journeys, I've gotten some of that vision of how it really has affected them. So who knows?
Okay, so then I want to move on to like my older son. For whatever reason, I'm sure that we're part of it, and it's part of his life journey as well. That he's seeing a lot of ropes as snakes, and as an example, like spider webs. Like both my kids are petrified of it, and not even the actual spider, even the spider web, touching spider web, they freaked out. And if this is the only thing, there's no dramas, but especially from my older son, it's a pattern. Like a couple of weeks ago, we went to this retreat place. It's got kangaroos and wallabies like up the front. Wallabies is like small version of kangaroos. They're kind of cute and tiny. And I've got like other cousins of his is like as young as 4 years old and everyone else is hand feeding the wallabies and the kangaroos. And he's seen it. He knows that they're safe, but he's so terrified of doing it. And eventually I have to teach him like close eye process and breathing and all these things.
Yeah.
But then the other day, like last week, we went to soccer to see one of his good friends. Yeah. And I said, go and talk to your friend. And he's petrified of even doing that. And I can see that, and just talking to him, I understand that there's a lot of fear-based projection that's coming up. Like feeding the wallaby, like, what's going to happen, the worst case scenario, even though he may see there's no precedent to justify it, but it doesn't stop the story from keep playing and playing and playing. So any tips or guidance on?
Yeah, many things come to my brain. I think in many cases I was that shy kid as well. And my parents, I remember them saying, you need to talk to your friend in the car. We'd be in the car at soccer practice, whatever. And I was just off in my own world, and who knows. I think something that would have been magic for me as a kid was, instead of go talk to your friend, something empathetic and softer. I know it can be hard to talk to people sometimes, and something heart where I could feel in their heart that they got what I was feeling and that it was okay. My parents didn't have that calibrated, soft, attuned response in many situations. And I think it would have worked magic with me.
Yeah.
And they just didn't know how to do it or to do it. I have a feeling that could be nice. And actually, the Chris Voss hostage negotiator techniques are very much like that. When you can kind of speak to what's in their mind and let them know it's seen and heard and it's okay, the subconscious self-defense mechanism that is activating for them and is there to protect them can finally relax. And then a new pattern of intelligence will unfold. And then he'll feel free to go talk to the kid. That could really work. He sounds like a kid where that can work. It's probably not the only strategy, but I have a feeling that one will be nice with him.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say on that, well, one other thing I'll say, I sense he's probably, the two things that go off in my brain about him, and he probably has both, is a lot of sensitivity.
Yes.
And a need for certainty.
Yeah.
So that will really keep him caged. Oh, and that was really me. Wow. And I'm seeing now all the work I've done over the years to break all that down. Oh, I could talk about this for a long time, Gary. If I just keep it at that for now. And how familiar are you with submodalities from NLP?
A little bit.
So, want to do a little? Can I take you through a mini little exercise?
Yeah.
About submodalities?
Yeah.
So, don't worry, you'll be plenty conscious. Try taking a breath, so a deep breath, and sort of gently close your eyes, and then your attention can go inward a little bit. And see if you can just recall like a really wonderful memory. And let me know when you got it.
Yep.
And that memory, is it more of like a picture or a narration or a feeling? And some mixture of all that too. How would you say your brain is showing you the memory?
Yeah, picture a movie.
Picture. Cool. And a movie, so it sounds like it might be in motion.
Yeah.
Is it more moving or more still?
A bit more still.
Okay, cool. And is it in color or black and white?
Color.
Okay, cool. Take a moment and try making it into black and white. And when you make it black and white, do you experience that memory more or less?
Less.
Less, okay. And is it like are you in first person? Do you see the memory through your own eyes or from like a third person perspective?
Third person.
Third person?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And is it like a panoramic, you're totally immersed in the scene, or is it like in a frame?
Frame.
Oh, wow. Okay. And you said it's more still than moving, right?
Yeah.
It's in a frame. So we've got it in black and white. And now try making it see that scene, but in a frame that is half the size. So it's much smaller. And when you kind of shrink it down so it can fit in that half the size frame, do you experience the memory more or less?
The feeling is probably slightly more.
Wow, so when you made it smaller, you felt it more. And then, what if you took that frame and moved it like 1,000 feet away from you? Do you experience the memory more or less?
The memory probably less, but the feeling is just as strong.
Amazing. Okay, cool. And so now let's take it back and we'll bring it back 1,000 feet, back closer, and you can make it twice the size and you can put it back in color and just restore that memory to how it was. Tony talks us a little about this a little bit, and you can kind of come back to me now. There's visual, and there's auditory, and there's kinesthetic. And different people's brains are representing their experience in different ways. I'm probably like visual and feeling, kinesthetic. And when somebody has like a phobia, they're probably representing it to themselves as very big, overwhelming. And I wonder if there's a cool way where he could start to see that how he's representing experience is affecting how he shows up to it. Like when I was a kid, I was petrified of the ocean. We would go to the beach sometimes. I was so scared of the water. And I think I made the water so big in my mind, and I made the sound so loud. And so I was just totally overwhelmed. I couldn't even go in. And so there might be some experiences with him where you can show him that he has some choice over how he represents it. And actually, for example, when I was in middle school and high school, I used to get bullied because these kids, they would yell out when they saw me, they would yell out, "Hello, Jim," in this tone. And they just knew I didn't like it. Doesn't sound bad, right? But everyone knew I didn't like it, and they kept doing it. So over and over, multiple times a day, this would happen out of nowhere by surprise. And I felt so humiliated because everybody knew I didn't like it, and they saw these kids were doing it anyway. If I had known back then that anytime I heard "Hello, Jim," I could just be playing it in my mind in Donald Duck's voice, whatever, and make it ridiculous, that voice wouldn't have such an effect on me. And I could change the meaning and how it's represented in my brain. I have a totally different response.
What really resonated from what you shared and what's coming through me, it feels like that he's here to teach me a lesson rather than me trying to help him. And until I learn the lesson, these lessons are going to continue to pop up. So what you shared about relating as an example, maybe that is one of the golden key for me to better relating to him. Now that reflecting back to it, even though the charges, it may not seem like I'm going completely AWOL or nuts about it, but still there's charges that what he is going. As much as I want to blame society and they expect the kids to be a certain way, is more so something internally that I haven't made peace with completely yet, regardless of how he is.
And can I say one more piece to it?
Yeah, of course.
Having an emotional response to these moments that it's not serving him in the present moment. Have you ever seen like a dog which had a bad experience with a skateboarder, and anytime the skateboarder comes by now, the dog flips out at him?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
Not so much, but I get it.
You get it. All right, good enough. So, we do the same thing. We had an overwhelming emotional event from our past. Our subconscious learned a pattern in that moment to try to protect us and serve us. But the subconscious doesn't know the negative side of that behavior. It doesn't know the impact. It's just trying to protect and serve. And the subconscious doesn't really know time. That's why someone with PTSD, the military vet, hears thunder now, but the subconscious thinks it's the bombs from when they were at war, because it doesn't know that that was 15 years ago. It doesn't have time. And so the subconscious doesn't know that the emotional pattern that's running, it never knows when the pattern has finished its course. So it will do it forever until it can see something different. And so your son's response, even though it seems like it's not serving him in the moment, is a pattern that the subconscious is running that he learned in his past, and is there to protect and serve him. And in the moment, actually, that hostage negotiator talks about this a little bit too. When you make that pattern feel seen and appreciated for how it's here to serve, it almost needs to hear that first before it can look at the negative impact.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
It's just the old program. It just knows protect first, protect
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
Don't go talk to them. Don't do it. Protect, protect. And then
Yeah.
once you kind of, it can relax once it knows like, hey, thanks for protecting.
Yeah.
And then you can ease into a conversation about something else.
Yeah.
Man, I wish I could explain this better, but
Yeah.
hopefully it's making some sense.
Yeah. Another thought just slipped into my mind. So I just need to like find some magic mushroom and slip it into his meals.
Yeah, I'm sure because they're talking about MDMA therapy
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
these empathogens. I haven't done it yet. It sounds incredible. I'm sure these type of breakthroughs can happen this way too.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so many things, and it's about his subconscious self-protective mechanisms and how he's representing reality to himself, and
Yeah.
how much can he be open to receive from you some influence around it,
Yeah.
which takes some skill and some deft navigation that fits him.
Yeah.
Um,
Man,
have I given way
fascinating.
too
Like I could be talking to you with hours, like about relationships, about like sex, like how does that play into spirituality and sex magic and orgasm? Like what does that have to do with spirituality? How does it link to the chakra and the kundalini? And it's all really fascinating stuff. And I guess maybe the next opportunity we can connect a bit more on those topics.
I would love to. And also, do you know Deb Battersby in the Tony Robbins community?
Yeah, she's a trainer that I've worked every day with Destiny. When I was a senior leader, she was my trainer.
Oh, okay. So do you know her Freedom Point process?
Maybe not by name.
A lot of what I was saying about your son and his subconscious, I'm taking her coaching course right now on her Freedom Point process. And it's a brilliant way of releasing subconscious emotional patterns that aren't serving you anymore. And if you're interested sometime, and it could be a really interesting show if you're willing, we could find a couple of those patterns and re-engineer them. And everyone who I do it with is just like, they feel so light and clear and better afterwards. It could be a really fun process to take you through.
I'm sure it'll be. Well, thank you so much, brother. Like
Yeah,
the
thank you, Jay.
best podcasts I find of late are the one that spontaneously come up. It's not from my ego-driven ideals who should I talk to. It just suddenly popped up, and out of nowhere, you messaged me, and
Yeah.
within a few words, literally like no more than 50 words, we're already on the podcast and having great conversation. So thank you for all the wisdom that you shared and being so open and raw and real with everything about you and your continuous service to humanity and with your love and just being true to who you are. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, man. I'm excited for all the talking and hanging out that we're going to do in the future.
Love it. Thank you.